What if a dead man could still give orders that changed the fate of an entire nation and possibly the world? What if the most powerful theocratic ruler on earth had spent his final months quietly engineering a shadow government, embedding sleeper agents inside the military, locking in covert weapons deals, and activating a contingency war plan that would only trigger after his last breath? What if, right now, those orders are already being carried out and the world has no idea? In the next few minutes, you are going to find out exactly what Ayatollah Ali Khamenei left behind, who is now executing his final commands, and why what happens in the coming weeks could reshape the entire balance of power in the Middle East and beyond. Stay with us, because this is not just a story about one man's death. This is a story about what he built to outlast it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most consequential and underreported intelligence stories of the decade: the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, a man who ruled the Islamic Republic of Iran with an iron grip for over 3 decades. Did not simply mark the end of an era. It triggered a carefully premeditated sequence of events that Khamenei himself set in motion long before his body grew cold. What we are uncovering today is not speculation. It is a reconstruction of credible intelligence reports, regional military analysis, and documented behavioral patterns that paint a picture of a leader who refused to die without leaving destruction in his wake. So buckle up, because the story you are about to hear is as terrifying as it is real. To understand what Khamenei's final orders mean, you first need to understand the man himself. Ali Khamenei was not simply a religious figurehead, he was a geopolitical architect. For 34 years, he operated one of the most sophisticated covert influence networks on the planet, a system of proxy militias, intelligence cells, weapons pipelines, and financial conduits that stretch from Beirut to Baghdad, from Sana'a to Kabul. He did not build this empire to die with him. He built it to survive him. And the evidence now emerging suggests that in the final years of his life, Khamenei knew exactly what was coming and spent every remaining hour ensuring that his revolutionary vision would not perish with his body. That is what makes his final orders so chilling. They were not reactive, they were premeditated, they were precise, and they are already in motion. Here is where things get deeply unsettling. Western intelligence agencies, including operatives within the CIA and British MI6, have reportedly identified a series of communications that occurred in the months before Khamenei's death, communications that were not routed through normal Iranian state channels. These were encrypted, compartmentalized, and sent directly to hand-selected commanders within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, otherwise known as the IRGC. The content of those communications, orders, specific, detailed, and time-locked orders, instructions that were designed to activate only after a confirmed succession announcement. Think about what that means for a moment. Even before the supreme leader drew his final breath, an invisible countdown clock had already started ticking somewhere inside the bowels of Iran's most secretive military apparatus. And very few people in the world knew it existed. Let us talk about what we know regarding the structure of Khamenei's post-death directives, because this is where military analysts are raising the loudest alarms. The first set of orders, according to regional intelligence sources with ties to both Israeli Mossad and Gulf state intelligence networks, related to Iran's nuclear program. Khamenei reportedly authorized an acceleration of uranium enrichment activities beyond what any previous public declaration had suggested. This was not a spontaneous decision made by panicked successors. This was a standing order, one that had been documented, sanctioned, and sealed months before his death, designed to be implemented the moment the world's attention turned to the chaos of succession. While diplomats scrambled and cameras rolled, centrifuges were spinning faster. That is the genius and the horror of what Khamenei built. And that is just the beginning, because the nuclear angle, as alarming as it is, may not even be the most dangerous piece of this puzzle. In about 2 minutes, we are going to reveal what intelligence analysts believe is the most operationally significant of Khamenei's final commands, one that involves a network of sleeper cells positioned not just in the Middle East, but potentially inside Western capitals. But first, you need to understand the succession crisis that Khamenei deliberately engineered, because nothing that is happening right now is accidental. The question of who succeeds Khamenei was never going to be simple. But what is now becoming clear is that Khamenei actively worked to prevent any single successor from gaining enough power to reverse his legacy. This was a deliberate fragmentation strategy by ensuring that no one figure, not his son Motaba, not IRGC Commander Hossein Salami, not any of the senior clerics within the assembly of experts, had unambiguous authority. Khamenei created a power vacuum that would force all competing factions to compete fiercely, and in doing so, to out-radicalize one another. It is the oldest authoritarian trick in the book, and it works with terrifying efficiency. The man who wants to appear the most loyal to the supreme leader's legacy has to be more aggressive, more anti-Western, more committed to the revolutionary cause than his rivals. Khamenei built a machine that would generate its own extremism automatically, organically, and without any further instruction from him. Now, here is something that very few outlets are talking about, and it deserves your full attention right now. In the weeks immediately following Khamenei's death, there were a series of unusual military movements recorded by satellite imagery analysts working for several Western defense think tanks. These movements were not consistent with standard rotational deployments or training exercises. They involved IRGC Quds Force units relocating with unusual speed and unusual equipment loads toward the Iraqi and Syrian borders. At the same time, Hezbollah commanders in southern Lebanon began implementing what appeared to be a pre-rehearsed security protocol, one that experts immediately recognized as a posture consistent with imminent operational activation rather than routine readiness. Nobody officially declared anything, nobody made a public statement, but the machinery was moving, and machinery does not move on its own. The sleeper cell question is the one that is generating the most classified traffic inside Western intelligence communities right now, and with very good reason. Over the past decade, Iranian intelligence, operating under the direct authority of Khamenei's office, methodically embedded operatives and sympathizer networks across Europe and North America. This was documented in a series of arrests that occurred across Germany, France, Belgium, and the United States, arrests that often involved individuals who had lived quietly and undetected for years, sometimes decades. They were not random. They were not opportunists. They were pre-positioned assets. And the key question that analysts are now urgently asking is this: did Khamenei's final orders include activation protocols for these networks? Because if they did, if somewhere in his encrypted final communications there existed specific triggers that would put these sleeper cells on standby or active status, then the implications are not just regional, they are global. Think about what this means for a moment, and think about it not as an abstract geopolitical scenario, but as a lived reality for ordinary people, men and women in London, in Berlin, in Toronto, in Chicago, people who go to work, drop their kids at school, and navigate the rhythms of everyday life with no knowledge whatsoever that, beneath the surface of their city, there may be operatives whose loyalty is not to the country they live in, but to the dying orders of a man thousands of miles away. This is not fear-mongering. This is documented history. Iranian-linked plots have been foiled in Europe and North America multiple times in recent years, and those were the ones we caught. The sobering reality of intelligence work is that you never know how many you did not. Stay with us, because what comes next is arguably the most shocking dimension of this entire story, one that connects Khamenei's final orders directly to a network of advanced weapons transfers that began months before his death and may now be effectively irreversible. This is the part that has senior Pentagon analysts genuinely worried. The weapons pipeline story begins in Russia. As Khamenei's health deteriorated, his government dramatically accelerated the exchange of advanced military technology with Moscow, a relationship that had already deepened substantially as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Iran provided Russia with Shade drones, which promptly became one of the most effective and feared weapons in the Russian arsenal. In return, sources inside both Russian and Iranian defense establishments indicate that Moscow provided Iran with significantly advanced air defense technology, electronic warfare systems, and, most alarmingly, assistance with ballistic missile guidance precision. But here is the piece that went largely unreported at the time. Embedded in these transfers were also agreements that would survive Khamenei personally. Not agreements between states in the traditional sense, agreements between institutions, between the IRGC and specific Russian defense industry entities, structured so that they could not easily be unwound by any future Iranian government that might seek a different path. Khamenei did not just buy weapons. He bought continuity. And then there is China. The strategic partnership that Khamenei signed with Beijing in 2021, a sweeping 25-year cooperation agreement worth potentially hundreds of billions of dollars, was not simply an economic deal. Intelligence analysts who have studied the full text of that agreement describe it as a comprehensive strategic alignment that encompasses military intelligence sharing, infrastructure development, and energy security arrangements that effectively give China a vested interest in the stability of whatever government emerges in Tehran after Khamenei. In other words, Khamenei did not just secure weapons from Russia, he secured a superpower patron for his revolutionary state from China. The implications for American foreign policy in the region are profound and are only beginning to be fully grasped by policymakers in Washington. He was playing three-dimensional chess on a board that most of his opponents did not even know existed. We are getting to the part of this story that even the most seasoned military analysts find deeply uncomfortable to discuss, because it raises questions not just about Iran, but about the fundamental vulnerability of the current international order. In just a moment, we are going to walk through what Khamenei's final orders may mean for Israel, for Saudi Arabia, and for the possibility of a wider regional war that could draw in American forces. But before we do, understand this: everything we have described so far, the nuclear acceleration, the sleeper cell protocols, the weapons deals, the succession trap, none of it was accidental. All of it was by design. And the design has a purpose. The Israel dimension of this story cannot be overstated. Khamenei harbored a genuine ideological, existential hatred for the state of Israel that was not performative and was not negotiable. He viewed the destruction of Israel not as a political aspiration, but as a religious obligation. And in his final orders, according to regional intelligence assessments, he reportedly reinforced and reaffirmed the operational mandates of every Iranian-linked militia and proxy force in the region: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq, with explicit instructions that the pressure on Israel must never relent, regardless of who sits in Tehran. This means that even a moderate successor, if such a person were to emerge, which seems increasingly unlikely, would face enormous structural pressure from the IRGC and from these proxy networks to continue prosecuting Khamenei's war against Israel. The proxy war is not a policy, it is a machine, and Khamenei built it to run without him. Here is something you need to sit with. The Houthis, that rebel group in Yemen that has been launching missiles and drones at commercial shipping lanes and at Israel, did not become this capable by accident. Their precision has improved dramatically. Their range has extended. Their willingness to strike has only increased. And according to defense analysts, tracking the flow of military technology through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and overland routes through Oman, the weapons pipeline into Yemen was one of the channels that Khamenei reportedly prioritized in his final operational directives. He looked at the Houthis and saw an asset that, for the price of continued weapons and intelligence support, was capable of threatening one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet. He made sure that pipeline would not dry up when he died. It has not. The Saudi Arabia dimension adds yet another layer of complexity to an already extraordinarily complex picture. The Abraham Accords and the subsequent, much discussed possibility of a Saudi-Israeli normalization agreement represented perhaps the single greatest strategic threat to Khamenei's regional vision. A Saudi Arabia at peace with Israel would have fundamentally reshuffled the alliance architecture of the Middle East in ways that would have significantly isolated Iran. Khamenei understood this, and intelligence analysts believe that one of his final strategic imperatives was to prevent that normalization from ever occurring by ensuring that his proxy networks maintained sufficient pressure on Israel and sufficient instability across the region to make some Saudi public opinion hostile to any such deal. Whether you look at the October 7th Hamas attacks or the Houthi campaign in the Red Sea or the ongoing militia pressure on American forces in Iraq, all of these, from Khamenei's perspective, served the same strategic objective: make peace impossible, keep the region burning, and deny his enemies the stability they need to realign. Here is why this matters to you directly, whether you live in New York or London, in Sydney or Toronto, in Frankfurt or Paris. The global economy runs through the Middle East. The oil, the shipping lanes, the financial interconnections, they are all threaded through a region that Khamenei spent his life trying to destabilize. When ships cannot pass safely through the Red Sea, your shipping costs go up. When oil markets panic, your energy bills follow. When regional wars threaten to escalate and American forces are put on alert, your tax dollars fund the response, and your sons and daughters may ultimately be called upon to serve in it. The orders of a dead man in Tehran are not an abstraction. They have already touched your life. They will touch it again. Let us now turn to what American and allied military planners are actually doing in response to what they know or suspect about Khamenei's post-death architecture. The repositioning of U.S. naval assets in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf region in recent months has been notable. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower's extended deployment, the prepositioning of additional air defense batteries in Gulf partner states. These are not routine exercises. They are signals. They are also insurance policies. The Pentagon is clearly war gaming scenarios in which multiple Iranian proxy forces activate simultaneously, a so-called multi-front pressure campaign that would stretch American and Israeli defensive resources across several theaters at once. This is not a theoretical concern. This is the operational scenario that Khamenei's final orders appear to have been designed to enable. And here is the terrifying kicker to that military analysis. The scenario that most concerns American planners is not a dramatic, televised war that begins with a single shocking event. It is the slow escalation, the steady grinding, multi-front pressure campaign that never quite crosses the threshold that would trigger a formal declaration of war, but that continuously bleeds resources, tests alliances, fractures coalitions, and creates humanitarian crises that generate political pressure at home in democratic countries. Khamenei studied how democracies break under sustained pressure. He understood that their greatest vulnerability is not military, it is political. A war that costs too much, lasts too long, and produces too few clear victories will eventually produce a public that wants out. He built his final orders around exploiting exactly that vulnerability. So where does this leave us? What is the actual status of Khamenei's posthumous war machine right now? The nuclear program is accelerating beyond any previously declared threshold. The IRGC has consolidated its position inside Iran's new political structure and is operating with greater autonomy than at any point in recent memory. The proxy network from Lebanon to Yemen remains active, armed, and operationally directed by commanders who were personally selected and empowered by Khamenei himself. The weapons agreements with Russia and the strategic partnership with China provide diplomatic cover and continued material support. The sleeper networks in Western countries remain a documented and unresolved threat, and the succession process in Tehran, rather than producing a reformist or moderate, appears to be generating exactly the kind of hardline leadership competition that Khamenei designed it to produce. Every piece of this picture was put in place deliberately. Every piece is functioning as intended. There is a lesson embedded in this story that goes beyond Iran, beyond Khamenei, beyond the immediate military and geopolitical details we have walked through today. It is a lesson about the nature of power, about the difference between leaders who build institutions and leaders who build cults of personality, about the terrifying capability of a single determined mind to shape events long after it has ceased to function. Khamenei was many things: a tyrant, a revolutionary, a strategist, a paranoid authoritarian, but he was never a fool. He understood that the true measure of a leader's power is not what they control while they are alive. It is what they set in motion that continues after they are gone, and what he set in motion is enormous. The world is only beginning to reckon with its true scope. So here is what we are asking you to do right now. Do not look away from this story. Do not let the daily flood of news cycle distract you from what is genuinely one of the most consequential geopolitical developments of our time. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening in the Middle East, not the sanitized, surface-level version, but the real strategic picture. Subscribe to this channel because we are going to keep following every development of this story as it unfolds. The succession battles, the nuclear negotiations, the proxy activations, the Western intelligence responses. We will be here cutting through the noise, giving you the analysis that you cannot get anywhere else. Stay vigilant, stay informed, because in the world that Khamenei built, a world of shadow wars, covert orders, and carefully engineered chaos, the most dangerous thing you can be is uninformed, and the most powerful thing you can be is exactly the opposite.